Learning on the Sukkah Perek Halacha Yud Beis. If somebody makes a sukkah under a tree, also as if he put it in his house because the tree is attached to the ground and he's under something which is attached to the ground, and covering it in the schachas posel. Here in the Peirush, it's like he did it on his house. Has to be under the heavens. The Magen Mishnah cites a Mishnah in Sukkah 9b, and the Gemara learns from Basukah's Teishru that you shouldn't sit in a sukkah which is under another sukkah, because it says Basukahs without a vov, and therefore the Torah adds that it has to be under the sky. Only the schach should cause the shade, nothing else. The Magen Mishnah cites the Gemara in Bostoner Rebbe, moreover, sukkah under a tree is possible because when the shade is greater than the sun. But if the sun is greater than the shade, it's kosher, because the sukkah is causing the shade. Therefore, a sukkah that's under a tree that its branches make a shade, a lot of it from the sun, is possible, because most of the shade is from the tree, and therefore the branches of a tree cannot be used because they're attached to the ground. However, if the tree leaves the sun go through its leaves and there's more sun than shade, it would be kosher, the sukkah underneath it. The Gemara questions that actually you have two things. You have schach kosher and schach posel. And why isn't it posel? Because the shade is now from two items, from kosher schach and posel schach. Papa answers that he bound them. What does Rashi? Rashi explains he took the leaves and he mixed them with the kosher schach, and you don't see the leaves outside of the sukkah. And since the schach is kosher is the majority, so the schach of the tree which is less, the limbs of the tree are nullified by the majority. The more questions, we know this in the Mishnah, that you put onto the sukkah, you put onto it the vines of grapes and or of gourds, anything that grows in a vine, and you place on top of the vine covering schach, it's possible. But if the schach was so much, or he cut off the vine from the ground, it's kosher. The Gemara explains what's the situation. If he didn't bind them, it would seem that the schach posel combines with the schach kosher, and it should be posel even if the majority is kosher. It must be that he bound them together. The Gemara answers, if the Mishnah would say hidlo elasad las, I would think only be the evidence kosher. Therefore, it says again to tell you that it's kosher lahat chilo, even to begin with. Therefore, he has to mention the tree also. That is under a tree, it's possible. The Riv cites the Mishnah in Sukkah 11a. If you put a lot on the roof of the sukkah, you put the vine, the grape. If the schach kosher is more than the schach posel, it's kosher when you tie them together or bound them together. If not, it's posel, because otherwise you're combining the shade from two items. You have to shake it to show that you're doing it for a sukkah, even that which is growing. It doesn't help what you just cut it off by alone, even though cutting it off is no longer attached to the ground, because then it's made by itself. The Magen Mishnah says the Rambam has the opinion like the Riv, but he explains Chovton, he separated one from the other, as we'll see soon. And he adds that the Rambam doesn't bring down the difference whether the majority of the shade is from the tree, or the majority is from the schach, because he brings it down with regard to when he mentions this halacha when you place a vine on top of a sukkah, and therefore you'll know the rule as well by under a tree. And the Rambam continues, Hidlo leo alei lono. If he caused to bend over the sukkah, to grow over the sukkah, the leaves of trees, he covered them, right? And then he cut off where they were attached to the ground. The schach kosher is more than the apostle ones, more than those that he cut, it's kosher. If the schach, which was not kosher to begin with, meaning it's growing from the ground, was more than the schach that you covered it with, even though you cut it off, you have to shake it after it was cut up. It's not enough to cut it. Because as we said, the sukkah has to be made to a sukkah, and not it should happen by itself. Now, Mishnah cites the Riv. He also explains that he made grow on the sukkah the vine of the wine. Because the Mishnah cites that Rambam explains the answer to the Gemara, Shechovton, that Shekotzon, he cut it, and that would seem to be what he's referring to here as well. Therefore, according to the Rambam, even the schach kosher was more than the leaves of the tree, and they're together. He still has to cut off the limbs of the tree in order that you shouldn't have schach posel with the kosher. If the schach kosher was less than the tree, even cutting off the branches won't help, because then you're using the branches of the tree, and that happened by itself. You have to also shake them. It should be done for the purpose of sukkah. The Kesef Mishnah explains, if the schach was so much, it's kosher without shaking it. That's where he bound it, he cut it. What it says in the Mishnah, or he cut it, it means he cut it and then also shook it. Even if the schach to begin with, that was not kosher, was the majority, it becomes kosher. Because if the whole schach was from the tree, after he cut them and shook them, then it's like he made the sukkah to begin with from the leaves of a tree that have been cut. As the Mishnah adds, so the Rambam explains the Peirush HaMeir it's posel. The Gemara explains it by Elon, where the shade is greater than the sun. But if the sun was greater than the shade, it would be kosher, even though he's combining schach posel to schach kosher, because he tied them together. That he cut off the branches that are giving shade to the sukkah. It's talking about that the schach posel was less than the kosher. Therefore, even if he just bound them together, even though he didn't pick them up and put them down, it's kosher. If the non-kosher schach is greater, Misrali, the schach posel is more than the kosher. We see that from the shade. Therefore, even if he cuts it off, it's posel. And if he didn't do anything, it would not be a kosher sukkah, even though it's not attached to the ground, because he didn't make it. It was there anyway, until he shakes it and it causes, and then puts it down together again for the purpose of sukkah. And he adds, even if when he cut them, they technically, when you cut them off, they shake. That's not enough. He has to shake them specifically with his hands for the purpose of sukkah.